I welcome you to another live stream from our studios. With us here, two special guests. We have David Wood, and we also have the Apostate Prophet. He's still apostate so far, so we have no choice but to bring him and figure out why he has not really repented from his apostasy. With that in mind, David, what are we going to talk about today with Apostate Prophet and the rest of the people who are joining us?
I don't know. Maybe we should take questions or something. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Wait, first, do we have AP? Can he hear us now? What's going on there?
I think he can, because he did smile when I said certain things. So yeah, he can hear us.
I want to. Oh yeah, I hear the melodious sound of his voice. Can everyone else hear him?
Well, AP, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are
So
you?
good to have you, and thank you so much for your flexibility. I know we were going to meet an hour earlier, but we were kind of squeezed a little bit, and we wanted to talk about Muhammad, and then more about Muhammad, and then more videos about Muhammad. So, David, why don't you tell them about the things that we talked about?
How many
Muhammad?
videos did we just make about Muhammad and the satanic verses?
Well, we made a lot. I
1,000?
hope by the time our friends will watch it, they will leave following Muhammad, but that's yet to be seen. So we talked about the satanic verses. We talked about the worship of Muhammad. We talked about idolatry and forms of idolatry in Islam. And all of these things, of course, I'm sure AP is familiar with them. But let me ask you, AP, when you were a Muslim, whether devout or non-devout, who was Muhammad to you, or at least Muhammad to your community, whenever you heard his name?
He was the holy prophet, the most important human being to ever walk the face of the earth. He was everyone's beloved prophet, beloved man, beloved leader. We have to obey him fully, do whatever he says. And he was basically something like the assistant of God. It's like we have to acknowledge him together with Allah in order to be good, obedient Muslims.
Yeah. And
then he wanted to do like so many drugs and to what did we talk about before? He wanted to run around fornicating in the streets and do so many drugs and to urinate all over walls. He wanted those things so bad that he left Islam, even though he knows it's true, so he could do all these things. That's the story on the street, anyway.
Yeah, well, I wanted to run people over and fornicate in the streets and drink a lot of alcohol and do drugs and buy homes with interest, which is why I eventually ended up leaving Islam. That's what they say.
Anyway, at least he's honest, so that's the good part.
David, what about our late brother Nabil? Now, when you were talking to him, what did you perceive in terms of his connection to Muhammad, relationship to Muhammad, for instance?
Well, it was there are lots of Muslims like Nabil in the sense of very respectful, good, moral people. They're not running around doing a lot of the things that other young people might be doing and so on. And so they come across as really good people. And Nabil was a really good guy. But at the end of the day, you find out that he's been given a completely warped picture of Muhammad. The information has been filtered for him by his community, by his family, by his parents, to make Muhammad seem like a really, really wonderful, great guy. And then he's told to imitate this pattern of conduct. This is Nabil's pattern of conduct. The problem is it's not the real Muhammad. It's a false Muhammad that has been made to sound really, really good. And so you're a young Muslim, you're following this Muhammad, and you end up imitating some very wonderful characteristics. You end up with some wonderful traits in your life, and then trouble arises when you start finding things out about Muhammad. And so various things started to bother Nabil. The first thing he admitted, and he didn't admit anything until after he converted about things that were actually bothering him. But the first thing that he said really started to bother him was Muhammad saying that you could take your captives as sex slaves, rape them, sell them in the next town, and so on. It's so interesting because he never gave me even a hint that was bothering him. Later, after he left Islam, became a Christian, he told me it was just tearing him up inside to read this about Muhammad.
And I would agree. Things that I was hearing, I never gave the indication to people who were witnessing to me that it was bothersome to me. But later, I confessed to them that it did. My wife, like I said, she heard about Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. She never indicated that it was bothersome to her, but it was was actually eating her up. So what I'm saying is, Muslims are not going to really admit that, oops, that's wrong, and I agree with you. No, they're not going to tell you that, But it's good that, if the topic is appropriate to discuss, why not? Go ahead and discuss it. Go ahead, AP.
I want to add something to that. I mean, David basically explained it very well. But so when I was growing up, when I was a little Muslim child, growing up in a very devout Muslim family, I remember I had a series of books at my bedside that were Turkish, distributed by a religious Muslim organization in Turkey. The series was titled "My Beloved Prophet" in Turkish, and so the first picture that I got from who this guy is that we are following and that we are so loyal to was that he is a very beloved, a morally amazing guy. Here is the thing: we talk a lot about the moral problems and the terrible, unthinkable things that Muhammad did, and many people might perceive it as if Muslims are fully aware of the terrible stuff that Muhammad did, but they are just okay with that, and they are just defenders of all that stuff. But the average Muslim population is not really raised that way. I was in a religious Muslim family, and I was raised with the idea that Muhammad was a very lovely, loving man who was just fighting for the defense of his own people, and he cared so much about us, and he prayed so much for his ummah, for his Muslim community, and all that. And it is such a thing that Islam is taught to the current generation according to what the current generation of Muslims can handle. So we were not casually informed about all the terrible things that Muhammad did, and how old Aisha was, for example, when he married her, and how many wives he actually had, and the sex slavery and the mistreatment of people who were against him and who criticized him. I mean, we were told a few things, such as that concubines are allowed, and slaves are taken from the oppressors and all that, but we were never really given the true account of things. When you look at it from the outside, you realize, wait a minute, I was given an extremely distorted picture of who Muhammad really was.
Yeah. And again, I want to welcome everyone who's joining us from both channels. It's live streaming on David's channel, Acts 17 Apologetics, and also on my channel, Sira International. And we want to also, I want to thank my moderators and the moderators on David's channel. And we would encourage you to ask questions. Now, here's why I'm gonna be a little bit careful when I say ask questions. If your question does not contain the words Muhammad or Islam or biblical things, you can count on me not ever talking about him, because I've seen some questions right now that have nothing whatsoever to do with what we're saying. So if you feel like your question has been ignored, then your question was ignored. That's what I wanted to say.
Hey, you know what's cool? We've got right here, we've got a former Muslim who's a Christian, we've got a former Muslim who's an atheist, and we got a former atheist who's a Christian. That's
a miracle. That is a miracle, man.
This is the proof that this is the truth, that this is the true studio of God.
So, AP, let me ask you this. Have you ever also wondered, growing up as a Muslim, about bowing down to the Kaaba, for instance, or the idea of the black stone? Have you ever thought, I never thought about these things really as idolatry, but have you ever wondered about things like this?
The thing is, the mind is a little bit tricky. It's when you think about the past and how you thought in the past, you might perceive it as if you actually did think about those things the way you think about them now. So I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not sure if I thought about them that far, if I did really perceive those things slightly as idolatry. But I think what I am sure about is when I was a Muslim, and when I did learn about the Qibla and the Kaaba and how we pray and all that, it did occasionally cross my mind a little bit that this is that there is something strange to this. But I think I never pushed myself far enough to question that, because I was simply given the idea. I think I did even ask the question, because I remember very well that we were given this certain explanation several times, that the Qibla, the praying toward the Kaaba, is supposed to be a sign of unity, because Allah wants to unite us. He wants us to be one community that is in sync with each other, and that was the reason why we bow bow down towards this rock. But I never further questioned why this rock and what is the real backstory of that. All of that only came after I left Islam.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. There is a question here, David, is saying, how can you? It used to be there. It's gone now.
I did see a question that said, "What are women according to Islam?"
You may want to ask our nominee to answer that question.
What is a woman? What is women according to Islam? But you can actually give a reference from Surah 2. Your wives are a tilth. Your wives are a tilth. A tilth is ground you plow to sow your seed. Right? So women are a place to sow your seed, according to Islam.
Yeah, you're supposed to enjoy them as you wish, whatever.
That's
you
right.
do.
That's right. So the question is, how can you encourage a Muslim acquaintance to think more critically about Islam without offending or upsetting them? So that's to both of you.
Mm-hmm. And I see very similar questions. I've seen lots of similar questions that are along the same lines. What do you think, AP?
I know it's very hard because the indoctrination is such a big barrier in people's minds. Even if you show them so much reason, it's very hard to make somebody actually think. Often they need to have some motivator to dare to question their deeply seated beliefs. But I would say you could start with with analyzing the Quran and asking why you would trust Muhammad. And if there's any, even within the Islamic texts, for example, there is never any mention of Muhammad, of the people surrounding him witnessing, any of the revelations or the things that he does. The one thing that people will bring up is that the moon was split in two, and then you could ask them, how can you believe that the moon was actually split in two when it is simply absurd that in the 7th century nobody in the world witnessed such a thing? I mean, you can approach this from very different angles. It really depends on who we are talking about.
Yeah, and I would add. Notice AP talks about asking Muslims some questions, and just keep in mind the difference, because one of the goals as far as getting Muslims to think about Islam and think critically about Muhammad is to get certain information into their heads that has not been provided to them. Right, a lot of information that would cause them to doubt Muhammad has been kept from them. So you want to get that information across. But think about the difference here, right? If let's suppose that you're a Muslim coworker of mine, or we both go to the same school or something like that, and we start having a conversation. Imagine me saying, "Hey, did you know your prophet was a pedophile? He had sex with a 9-year-old girl. What sort of creepy pedophile is that?" Notice there's not going to be a lot of critical thinking there, right? Like defensive walls are going to tend to go. I know I talk like that in my videos. That's not the same way I would talk if I were just in a conversation one-on-one with a Muslim. But given some time, I would want to get that information across. So compare that. Hey, your prophet's a pedophile, where defensive walls are going to go up. The person is not going to be thinking critically. The person is going to be thinking about how to blast away at you in return, or how to get away from you as quickly as possible. Notice the difference between that and, on the other hand, me saying, hey, I was watching a video by, some wacko who calls himself the Apostate Prophet on YouTube. And he said that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl, that this was one of Muhammad's wives, and he was criticizing it and so on. But he's an atheist, so I would like to hear your perspective as a Muslim on this. So could you go ahead? Would you be willing to look into that and then to give me your perspective on this issue, so I have a Muslim perspective and the perspective of this atheist? Notice you're not attacking there. You're asking someone for a Muslim perspective on the same issue. You are much, much, much more likely, I would say, to get a Muslim to start thinking critically about Muhammad doing that, because now it's going to be thinking, okay, well, I have to defend my prophet to someone who's asking for information, because I have to refute the apostate prophet and show the truth about Muhammad. So that's someone who might do a little bit of studying on how he could actually defend Muhammad. But in the process, he's going to learn more information. And then as the Muslim comes back and gives his response, you'll be inclined to just, no, that's stupid. No, that's not a good response. Give a little bit of leeway. You can raise some some issues with what he has said, you can also just, thank him. Thank you for giving me your perspective on this. And would you mind if I had any further questions that I could ask you? Could I come back and ask you more questions, and then come back with something else, or come back with another point about Aisha and so on? And over time, since now the person is interacting with you and not just mad at you and doesn't ever want to talk to you again, you'll get a lot more information into the Muslim. And because he's actually trying to wrestle with the issue so that he can explain things to you, he ends up thinking a little critically in the process.
No, hold on a minute, David. What if the person questioned raises this amazing objection, this very well-informed objection, and says, "But what about all the English kings who also married, little children or?"
Well, then you're just refuted. It's game over. It's ball game.
I really like this setup, by the way. It looks like here it looks like I'm watching over you too. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's great. Actually,
I'm judging you here.
So I saw a question. I cannot remember now which one it is, to be honest. Yes, this is the one. Saying, is it easy to change moderate Muslims into radical? That's the first part. And can living in the West make Muslims to have better moral, which may be against radical ideology? Let me take a stab at this, and then I'll have both of you address it. Can you change a moderate Muslim to a radical? Absolutely. Make him religious and have him read the Quran and the Seerah and what Muhammad taught, and you got yourself a devout Muslim who will become radical. I've been through it myself. I lived it, and I can tell you that you wouldn't think twice about the fact that you're radical. You would think you're fundamentalist in a way that you are following the truth, following Islam. As far as can the West and living in the West change your morality as a Muslim, I am really not aware of that. I mean, in fact, Muslims and the Muslim communities will attack Muslims who become westernized, and they actually use that against you. But can Islam westernize its ideology? And the answer is yes. It can sound to you like a westernized ideology or westernized approach or Christianized approach, beginning to use arguments that as if it sound like Westerners talking or Christians talking, but in fact, you try to water down any behaviors or anything that may make Islam look awful. What do you say, David and AP?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on the person. It's not like you could just radicalize anyone. And I made a video about this a long time ago called the Jihad Triangle, and I point out that getting an actual jihadi isn't just one factor. It's a combination of factors. So someone might not be radical for multiple reasons, right? He could just not know that Islam teaches. He might not have an accurate understanding of what Islam teaches, and so he might have no intentions at all of subjugating the world or anything like that. Or he might have a personality that's just going to reinterpret anything because he doesn't want to believe that Islam. So you could put it right in front of his face, what his prophet said, and he still would just reinterpret it. So, there could be different kinds of reasons for why someone doesn't want to subjugate the world in the name of Allah. The problem is, some of those reasons you can overcome when the time comes, right? In other words, if the number of Muslims in a population reaches a certain critical mass, then if you're not joining them, if you're not part, they're coming after you too, right? They're gonna come after you, harass you, attack you as well. In other words, when a group like ISIS takes over, you're going to have to get on board, even if you were moderate before, or you're in trouble too. And so, it's just a sad situation that you're sort of in trouble either way.
Yeah. AP.
I think you both said a lot here, and it's all appreciated. I just want to add a few things. I made a video about this before. There is actually a TV series, a Swedish one, which is called Caliphate, and you can even find it on Netflix. Why am I giving a Netflix suggestion? Well, the show is a Swedish show that is very well informed, and it gives people a perspective to understand why regular people who are not even religious become radicalized and join terrorist organizations, for example. And what they also accurately depicted there, and which is something that we don't often talk about, which is a context that needs to be addressed, is that it is not just the learning of religious texts and scriptures that makes people radical. It is also there are also many different factors, such as Muslims, for example, live often as this one unit, one nation, and they learn that they are supposed to stand with each other, stay loyal to each other, that the others are simply different, the others can't be trusted, they are friends of one another, and so on. And if certain Muslims are not very religious, they don't follow their religion properly, in fact, if they are sinners, then it can happen that these sinning people who are aware that they are Muslims, that they have obligations, but they don't follow these obligations properly, these people can be subjected to approaches from religious people to do something for their religion, and they can be guilted into into doing more for their religion and becoming radical. This for them is an easy way out of their sinning, lacking, apathetic Muslim identity. So this is for them an easy way to do something for their religion. And since Islam has this whole thing, since Islam has this whole system of we are together against the others, it's very likely that people who feel like they are not good enough Muslims take such a way out and become radicalized. That is very common. It happens very commonly among people who join Islamic terrorist organizations, for example. Can Muslims adopt better morals in the West? Ayaan Hirsi Ali, for example, said that she actually thinks that Muslims coming to the West does more harm to Islam than people think, because those Muslims who come to the West are humans like all of us, and they see that life is better over here. They adopt different values, which result in a gap between them and Islam. This changes Islam naturally and is actually good for the downfall of Islam. So I would definitely agree with her on that.
Sure. Anything else you want to add, David? So, David, there's a question, even though it's on my channel, it's for you probably. When will you guys make a new series of Islamic videos, Boom Boom, Fake Islamic History? Is that on the horizon?
Fake Islamic history? No, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. We still have a lot of Boom Boom Room episodes to make.
Yeah, and I think they're talking about the historical criticism that we've been doing lately, like Jay Smith, myself, other people. And, we have to be careful, by the way. I mean, and Jay knows and others know, it's always good to uncover and unearth these research data that has been hidden basically either in books or articles. Not a whole lot of Muslim knew that there is questions about the Qibla, for instance, or questions about Mecca and when Mecca emerged and the history of Islam and the question about the standard narrative and so on and so forth. But we also, it's always good to point these things out, meaning there is contradictions between what we know about Islam versus what the data support. I always like to err on the side of caution. What if tomorrow we discover something that could actually prove to us, anything relevant to the standard Islamic narrative? So we have to leave the door also open for that. I'm not against, of course, exposing the fact that there are some contradictions, and it is, of course, on the Muslims to try to go and investigate things like, for instance, how do we know that Muhammad was born in 570? How do we know that Islam started in 610 AD? How do we know that he died in 632? How do we know that the Qibla initially was toward Jerusalem and then later was towards Mecca? And the list can go on and on and on. We rely on Islamic sources that were written at a later time. There is a lack of eyewitness accounts. But this is just the direction I like to take myself. AP, any thoughts on this?
No, nothing further to add. Okay.
Endorsed.
Yeah, endorsed.
David, are you endorsing it too?
No.
No. Of course, David would. He cannot endorse anything.
Endorse my own stuff. That's it.
No, really, seriously, you did a debate. I know it's a friendly debate with Jay about the existence of Muhammad. Tell us why, for instance, just reiterate to people why you take the position that no, Muhammad did exist.
At the end of the day, I just really believe it's too much. It's too much stuff, right? The idea that Muhammad was invented later, right? So if you want to say that he's invented some later time, during the time of some ruler, and they invent this story about Muhammad, the number of problems that they invent, and not just the number of problems they invent, but the number of sources about these problems they invent. So notice, if, and this is an example I give, but if you're saying that the story of Muhammad is just invented at this point, well, guess what? There never was any satanic verses. They never happened, right? When you line up the stories about the satanic verses, you clearly see from the earliest until the latest that they water it down and water it down and water it down and water it down and water it down. So at first, Satan actually puts it in Muhammad's mouth. Muhammad speaks it. Later sources, it's just Satan speaks it and imitates Muhammad's voice to make it sound. Still later, suddenly the story is taken out and the pagans are bowing down in honor of the revelation, but they don't even say what the revelation is, right? It slowly gets watered down. But guess what? None of that ever happened. Nothing there. So you're saying that someone invents the story about Muhammad delivering and invents the story about it being watered down and invents another story about it being watered down and invents it. Why are you inventing any of that? If you're coming up with an entire history of how this thing got watered down, then it must be embarrassing at the time you're inventing the story. Well, why in the name of common sense are you inventing the story? Why are you inventing 50 different sources on this story that you're made up? And notice that's just the example of the satanic verses. You go through the various hadith collections and so on. There's so many stories just piled upon. Just massively mounted up. And then you look and it's not just Muhammad, it's the supporting cast, it's the wives, it's the next generation. And so they've got you got Abu Bakr and he has kids and then they have kids and they keep records of all these people and what they did and so on. If that is all just invented, this is the most amazing conspiracy. This is the mother of all conspiracy theories. There's never been a conspiracy theory that involves more conspiracy than this. Like none. Like if you take the biggest conspiracy theory in the history of humanity, you'd have to multiply it times 100 million to get what you're required for Islam to just be invented in some later time and then writing all this back. With that said, there are problems with the standard narrative. I grant there are all kinds of problems with the standard narrative, but I just can't bring myself to say, he's made up. He's a fabrication.
Yeah, the position that I always like to take is that there was somebody and something happened, and there is embellishment and re-embellishment and improvement to the story. And maybe there were a couple of factions that held on to certain parts. Others distanced themselves from him, and you begin to see variations of that story, maybe. But you're right. At a later time, you begin to see these improvements taking place. For instance, if you look at the tafsir, the commentaries, you'll see that the earlier commentators relied more heavily on opinions. And you get to the 7th, 8th century of Islam, and you begin to see they reinforce opinions now by alleged hadiths, alleged sayings of Muhammad. In other words, they kind of figured out the weaknesses and they began to plug those holes, if you wish, holes in that narrative. AP?
Let me just add one more thing. I just wanted to add, I want to point this out because I know two guys, both Jay Smith and Robert Spencer, who deal with this issue. I just wanted to clarify, even though I believe Muhammad existed, and I can't imagine a scenario where I would not believe that anymore, just because of the sheer volume of the information and just how much it would boggle my mind to think that they just made up all of this stuff. Even though I believe in Muhammad, it's still a good idea to push the idea and to press Muslims on. How do you even know that Muhammad existed? Look at all these problems with your narrative, even about Muhammad's existence. And so, you have to push that because you want Muslims to be able to defend their own position, and they need to defend their own prophet, and they need to be the ones answering some of these problems. Like if Muhammad's going around Arabia doing all this stuff, why don't you have more? Why has no one ever heard of him? Why isn't Mecca on these ancient maps and so on? So they do have to answer that. So you do have to press the issue. So I just wanted to be clear on that even though I believe Muhammad existed, go ahead and press it. Now, AP?
Yeah, AP?
I think David makes some great points. I want to add to that a few things. If you ask me, I would say I'm not an expert in the field. I don't concern myself too much with the historicity of Muhammad. But when you think about it, it is almost, I would say it is almost impossible that Muhammad did not exist. And we have no reason little to no reason to assume that he didn't exist or to conclude that he didn't exist. There's simply too much going on. The Muslims were not even united enough at the very beginning to, to really pull through with this, with such a conspiracy of inventing a figure who. I mean, the earliest sources that we have about Muhammad, the external sources, non-Muslim sources, come from 630 from the 630s AD, which is just after Muhammad's death, and only at that time the Muslims were already too divided internally. They became more divided within those same generations that must have witnessed Muhammad over those decades. It is simply inconceivable to me that despite all those divisions, these people would somehow, cling to a made-up figure or a made-up myth of a figure called Muhammad and actually go through with that without ever questioning it. We have too many sources that lead back to Muhammad. We have remnants of certain writings, certain documents that are said to have been written in the time of Muhammad. Certain companions left these, what's it called? It's called sahifa, which are the very primitive forms of hadith collections that are supposed to lead back to Muhammad's time, where people who were directly with Muhammad made some very primitive attempts at recording the things that he said. I don't know, it's just, we have a lot of historical figures that we say they existed, and we have much less evidence for their existence than we have for Muhammad. So by historical standards, looking also at the historical consensus on the historicity of Muhammad, I don't think we have any reason to conclude that Muhammad didn't exist. That said, I also don't really concern myself with that issue very much. I focused more on whether Muhammad existed or not. We have a Muhammad, a historical, a central figure within the Islamic religion. And that central figure, based on the claims of Islam itself, did and said a few things, and those things are problematic, and we need to address those. The historicity is very much a secondary issue, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question here from Happy Camper. Thank you for your super chat, by the way. The question is, do you think scholars will attempt to change Islam over the next decade to mitigate damages, apostasy, so on and so forth? As for an example, the questioner is saying the suggestion to remove some hadith, like for instance, the government of Turkey made that suggestion. The idea that the Crown Prince of Saudi also alluded to something like that. So I'm gonna start, and I'll let you guys answer also. Yeah, they may attempt, sure. I mean, I'm sure some scholars will attempt to try to either clarify things, try to fix things, plug some of the holes, maybe even water down some of these things in hadith or in seerah, whatever the case might be. But we're living in a digital age where it will be impossible for anyone to hide everything, because someone has a copy of it. Someone have kept it somewhere, and someone going to come back later in the future and show that what you're saying contradicts what I have. For instance, you look at examples, just in history alone, when it comes to the history of the Quran itself. While we are told that the Quran is perfectly preserved, we have evidence today that there are Quranic manuscripts that have corrections in them. The idea that Uthman burned all competing copies, well, we know that that's not true, even from Islamic own sources, because we have someone by the name of Ibn Mujahid 300 years later, after the time of Uthman, still had to deal with variant text reading. So what I'm saying is, it will be impossible to just change history just because you decided that you want to do that. Are they going to attempt to do some cleanup work? Sure. Clean up at aisle 7, I'm sure they're going to do something like that. So,
yeah, I'll just.
I want to give a very quick response to this.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a quick response too. And
no, David, you need to wait. First, I respond.
Yeah, AP first.
You let the atheists last, all right? Christians first, atheists last, all right? No, I would just add very quickly that I think you'll have both reactions, right? Because Muslims are seeing apostates leave, people leaving Islam, and you can have two basic reactions. One, we need to fix Islam so that people aren't as bothered by it and they don't leave. But the other reaction is we're not being devout enough and we're compromising, and that's why people are leaving Islam. Because you do have like Daniel Hakikachu and people like that and his followers who are, no, we need to state exactly what Islam teaches and not be ashamed of it, and that's the way forward. So I think you're gonna have both reactions.
Yeah, AP, you get the rest of the day to take over.
Yeah, go ahead and embarrass.
Oh, fantastic. I see David lost some weight. He's really trying, I guess. I don't know.
Oh,
But
yeah,
aside from
he
that,
hasn't been eating anything. Trust me on that.
I know, I understand. Well, see, now he now he now I lost track of my thoughts.
It's about whether scholars are gonna tweak.
Oh
his
yeah, oh yeah.
Quran.
So what I wanted to say in response to the question is, what do you mean by attempt? I mean, Muslim scholars have been doing that forever. They have been trying to change Islam and trying to rewrite the sources of Islam from the very beginning. The problem with that is, I said this before, you can't change Islam. It's just a very futile attempt. The Quran is there. You either have that Quran as an authentic source or you don't. If you prove at some point the Quran had additions or modifications, and Muslims come to accept that as a fact, then Islam is done with. It's over. There is no, you can't possibly get out of that. You can't change that, because that is the fundamental claim that Islam relies upon, that the Quran is the perfect word of Allah that was delivered and perfectly preserved verbatim as it is. If you discover and agree that there were changes made, then Islam is done. It's over. When it comes to the hadith, there are already attempts. There have been attempts forever to say, well, this hadith is actually not entirely correct. This one is not true. Muhammad also said this and that. There is already a huge disagreement on that within the Islamic community today, as has been the case forever. But we have a concept called mutawatir hadith in Islam. I'm sorry, I said this would be a short response, but apparently it's not.
That was a lie.
No, I told you to take forever.
We have a concept called mutawatir hadith, which are, by Islamic standards, hadith that are agreed upon to be authentic, because it is inconceivable that so many people came together and invented this hadith. That is a definition by Islamic standards. And those hadith already contain too many problematic things, be it historicity, theology, the scripture, the morals, and all that. So attempts will be made, but it will never be successful. It will only end up breaking Islam apart.
Agreed.
Hey,
Go ahead.
It's funny. People are saying when you said David's not eating, they all said, "Hey, David's fasting for Ramadan." I just wanted to be clear, guys. If I were fasting for Ramadan, I would be gaining massive amounts of weight.
That's
because
true.
That's what happens in Ramadan. You gorge yourself at night, and you gorge yourself right before dawn, and then you gain weight throughout the month of Ramadan for your fasting.
Yeah,
That's why I just say change the name to the Feast of Ramadan, and I have no problem. I have no problem.
Look at me. I gained a lot of weight. That's because of my Ramadan.
Yeah, it's fasting.
Yeah, there you go.
AP's feasting for Ramadan.
Yeah, I'm starting early. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Ra, thank you so much for your super chat. By the way, Ra, we agree with you that chapter 17 of the Quran has a problem when Muhammad claimed that there is a masjid, known as the Masjid al-Aqsa. We know that. I mean, it's just...
And so just to be clear, earlier when I'm saying that I believe Muhammad existed, I also believe there's a lot of fabrication. There's lots of fabrication and tweaking sources and so on. But yeah, so yeah, that is a problem.
Yeah. So
Well, I would say Muhammad had no idea what the masjid in Jerusalem actually was in reference to. He didn't understand it a bit. He probably got some traditions of it during his travels and from the Jews, but he had no clue what was actually going on. He just wanted to combine it with his religion and failed.
I've even read suggestions that he wasn't even talking about that mosque. He was talking about a much closer mosque, and that the farthest mosque was still something that was comparatively very close to them. And later Muslims actually embellished it to make it sound like I was talking about Jerusalem.
Yeah. I mean,
we have it in the Quran. Sorry, we have it in the Quran and backed up with the early biographies that the Jews were mocking him and mocking the Muslims because they were saying, "Hey, you're just imitating us. You're just worshiping toward our destination of worship." So Muhammad got angry and then changed the direction from Jerusalem toward Mecca. I mean, this is the Islamic narrative. This is the Islamic tradition itself, and the Quran then responds and says, don't be sad. I will change it toward the direction that you desire, which is Mecca. And then Muhammad rejoices. And the excuse that is given by Allah, the Almighty Creator, the Eternal One, is the early Qibla toward Jerusalem, like the Jews, was just to test the Muslims. But now this is the correct one. Now pray toward Kaaba, which is just very absurd. I mean, seriously, Muslims look at this and laugh about it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we had a comment. I mean, even though I'm not really so sure why our friend here is asking that question, Like the question is like, why do Muslims not know that their arguments have been dealt with 1,000 years ago in the church councils? Well, I think you're making a lot of assumptions here that Muslims even go and investigate these councils, for instance. But I want to ask this question now to both of you. Today's Muslims who have access to the internet, today's Muslim who can access libraries, today's Muslims who can watch these videos and go and investigate the sources, why do they still insist anyway that their history is perfect, that there is nothing wrong with the Quran, and so on and so forth? I can understand the other generations, of Muslims. But what about these?
Well, it takes a while. I mean, these things take a while because it's not like all these Muslims are investigating these issues. In general, they're still getting their information about Muhammad from their leaders and their families and so on, and they're going to school and they've got other things to do. But yes, as far as Muslims, not getting this 500 years ago or 800 years ago or 1,000 years ago, the Muslim community for a really long time was pretty well insulated, right? They're not interacting with this stuff. All their information about Muhammad and the Quran is coming from their Muslim leaders. You can't go and criticize what they're being taught or you'll get your head chopped off. And so the Muslim community for a very long time was very well insulated from hearing criticisms of the Islamic position. So now we've just, in our lifetimes, transitioned into an era where now all the sources are wide open for people to criticize, and we have open access to anyone with an internet connections. But notice, this has been a very short period of time when all of this has happened. And, AP's been on YouTube for a couple years. Me, I'm considered like a grandpa on YouTube. And
Dinosaur.
I've been at it for 12 years. So this stuff is brand new. And you're already looking at, as of a couple years ago, 24% of young Muslims were leaving Islam. So it's just getting started, but.
Yeah. AP, you want to add something to that?
Yeah. David made a good point. He's a dinosaur in this whole stuff. He experienced it from the very beginning. But the issue is, I experienced it myself. I had a lot of questions when I was a Muslim, and I was during that period when I began to question my beliefs. I was extremely religious, and I was really in love with my religious beliefs. I thought this is the absolute truth. I should never ever go away from this, and I prayed to Allah to keep me in that spot. The thing is, humans have the cognitive biases. Like the cognitive dissonance, which is very much at play here. You have the very harsh indoctrination of Islam, and you are faced with questions that contradict your Islamic beliefs. And then you are between two conflicting things. You have your fundamental, firm Islamic beliefs, and you have the doubts that challenge those beliefs. And you are now between them, and you have to make a choice. That state gives you great discomfort. I felt that same thing. Now, the average Muslim would say, even I myself would say back then, that I was too weak. I gave in. I didn't have enough faith. I wasn't good enough, and I went for the doubts and started breaking down my religion. Others have different motivations to hold on to their beliefs. For example, they want loyalty, they want community, they want safety, and so on. So they let go of those doubts, just shut them down, find some explanations for them, and hold on to their Islamic beliefs instead, and continue going on with them, despite the fact that you lay it down very plainly that, for example, the whole Jesus narrative in Islam is entirely nonsensical, that the Kaaba doesn't make sense, that the sun doesn't go to a place and prostrate to Allah's throne at night, and so on. Yeah.
Hey, hold on. Did you notice this comment here? Who made your green screen new set? Who made your green screen? Guys, can we get a wide shot? Is it possible to get a wide shot?
In fact, I want to stand and walk.
I'll go stand and walk over here.
Yeah,
huh?
Okay.
We get a wide shot? Hold on. Wait, this is a green screen.
There is nothing fake here except this screen we're AP on. That's the only fake thing we have.
This is a green screen back here, right, ladies and gentlemen?
There you go.
This is the best green screen ever. This is the most amazing green screen I've ever seen.
Can you guys see me?
I am the only fake here.
This is right here. Right here. This is the screen. Can you guys see me?
Look, it's green. Hey, I thought green screen doesn't work very well if you're right up against this screen. It's so weird. It must be magic green screen.
There is no fake stuff behind me.
Yeah.
We do not do fake news.
Respect the game, people. This is old school, real studio.
This is hilarious. No, I am the only thing that is fake here. Everything else looks real.
It's funny, we flipped out because they said green screen.
So offended.
So, I thought I saw someone was saying, well, Kevin Zander, what is your question in the first place? So I can tell you if it is appropriate or not. I mean, I don't see a question here.
You probably questioned earlier, but they were coming too fast.
Yeah. Did you guys catch any? Did you catch any question on your channel?
There's tons of questions on my channel.
I only see questions about David's weight. And all that.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I mean, if you just want me to randomly pick questions, someone says, question, whenever my Muslim friends hear about terrorist groups, they say, oh, they're not Muslims. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a miracle of reinterpretation.
Muhammad said, I've been made victorious with terror. So, I mean, maybe Muhammad's not a Muslim either. But, I mean, terrorism has been a core tactic of Islam to achieve the goals of the religion for 14 centuries. So if it makes you not a Muslim, then you got 14 centuries worth of problems.
Let me tell you something. I learned as a Muslim, and I can reaffirm this in basically every book of Islamic creed, that a Muslim may never claim that another self-professed Muslim is not a Muslim or is a non-Muslim unless that self-professed Muslim explicitly says, I am not a Muslim anymore, or I don't believe in Allah anymore, or openly and willingly and knowingly contradicts with a very clear Islamic doctrine. For example, the Muslim is told you have to pray 5 times a day, and then the Muslim says, "Yeah, I know it says that, but I don't think so." Then that person can officially be declared a non-Muslim. Otherwise, you are not allowed within the Islamic creed and the Islamic religion to say this guy is a non-Muslim, this guy is a non-Muslim, this guy is a non-Muslim because he kills innocent people. This is simply not something that you can do. This is an invention in our time. So. Yeah. It's not compatible with the Islamic theology itself to do that.
I'm going to address Kevin's question, and then we can go back again. David, I think there is a question I think I noticed on your channel as well. So, Kevin, you're saying, why hasn't God allowed someone like Elijah to come on the scene and expose Allah just as Elijah exposed Baal? Well, it doesn't work that way, Kevin. I mean, if God wants to do this, well, every day he's going to send us somebody, because every day there is something fake. But I can tell you an answer, since you're using the Bible and Elijah in the Old Testament. We just did this in a series that we were recording earlier, and I talked about Deuteronomy 13. Look what Deuteronomy 13 says, starting from verse 1. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. Notice what the reason is. For the Lord your God is testing you. Okay? So we know that God is testing us based on what? Based on the truth that he has revealed to us already. Jesus says, false prophets and false messiahs will arise and deceive, even if possible, the elect. Notice what Jesus is saying? So we have the truth already. I don't need God to send me another prophet to be able to figure that out. He already sent me Jesus, and it's done. That's it. And we have the Bible, we have the Word of God, and that's what I would use to test basically what is false and what is not false. David.
We're good.
No, you refrain from that. AP, would you like to use the Bible all the time, AP? So go ahead and give us an answer.
I agree.
There you go. Thank you. So there's a question on your channel. Here.
What's that?
Did Muhammad think...
Did Muhammad think Dhul-Qarnayn was a Muslim? Yes.
Yeah, he did, of course.
He was a rightly guided guy who was doing a lot of amazing things given to him with the power of Allah. And it just happens to be so that Dhul-Qarnayn also is oddly similar to Alexander the Great and legends about him, but that's just a coincidence.
Yeah, so that's the real issue, right? I mean, the Quran indisputably portrays him as a Muslim, and all of the events that are described in the narrative about Dhul-Qarnayn just happen to parallel all these things about Alexander the Great. But we know Alexander the Great was as pagan as you could possibly be. So Muslims say it's not talking about Alexander the Great, it's someone else. And all the events just happen to line up with Alexander the Great, and not actually line up with things Alexander the Great actually did. They line up with what are called the Alexander romances, these fictional stories about Alexander. And so it's just coincidence. And then we ask, okay, well, if it's not Alexander, who is it? And show us how this person did all these things, like finding this place where the sun set, which, by the way, Alexander did in the Alexander romances. That's another parallel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else found the place where the sun sets? Right? It was Alexander, but if it's not Alexander, then who else?
That is true, man. Well, I don't see any questions so far related to what we're talking about. AP, tell us anything new you're working on, any videos people should expect?
Definitely. I just wanted to address a very quick question here that I missed. Somebody asked, Al-Fadi and AP, have either of you investigated why Imam Abu Hanifa was imprisoned by the Abbasid Caliph for 14 years? He died in prison. He was a scholar from Umayyad era. So how does this relate? Well, okay, I don't know if we actually want to go into this. This is very off topic and lengthy. But yeah, Imam Abu Hanifa was one of the greatest Islamic scholars, the founder of the first school of Islamic jurisprudence, the Hanafi school. Yeah. And many of these scholars who later became extremely respected, like praised so much and held in such high regard, were in their own times not very much in agreement with their Islamic rulers and their caliphs, who were pursuing different understandings of Islam. So they got in a lot of trouble. Imam Abu Hanifa and Ahmad bin Hanbal, for example, he was also another one who was very greatly in trouble with the law, because the Muslims were not united. They had no unanimous agreement on what Islam actually is. They were extremely divided on how Islamic law should work and what Muslims should definitely believe and not believe, and what they should accept and reject. So Muslims fought each other and resisted against each other and engaged in extremely heated debates, which ended in things like imprisonment and death. But yeah, that's just a backstory of Islam that many people are not aware of nowadays.
That's right.
But if anyone wants to add anything to that,
no. I mean, I think you did good. If you want to add even more, go ahead.
No, I'm fine.
Quick ones. Mert says maybe it's out of context, but what kind of doctor Brother Wood is?
We don't know. That's the question. Does anyone know what that kind of doctor Brother Wood is?
A medical doctor?
Isn't he a medical doctor?
DSM doctor? DSM-5 doctor.
Can you say, I'm a medical doctor?
No. I'm a medical doctor. Yeah. In reality, it's philosophy, so nothing to do with medicine. Philosophy.
Yeah. Wonderful. Let's see. Looks like there are other
so nothing basically. Yeah.
Hell slide question. Muslims try to draw parallel between moon splitting and sun standing still by Joshua to say, if you have no problem believing that, then why are you mocking the moon splitting? Why are you mocking the moon splitting, David?
I have no problem with God splitting the moon or doing anything miraculous. The idea is, and you can, to be clear, you can have Christians that interpret Old Testament miracles in various ways, as is the universe coming to a stop, or is God performing some miracle to keep the sky lit up for the purpose of the Jews as they're fighting, or something like this. But if we're just sticking with this, if we're just going with the straightforward text, the claim is not, when it comes to Muhammad, the claim is not that God can't perform a miracle, or that it's absurd that God could perform this miracle. AP's objection is that there were tons of people around at this time, and there are tons of people writing around this time across the known world at the time. So why isn't anyone else talking about this? Why is no one else talking about the moon being split? There would have been plenty of people to see it. And the Muslim response is, well, they were all sleeping. And so
what a miracle.
The question is how seriously you take that. Assuming we go with the straightforward narrative about Joshua, why don't we have more sources on it? Well, what sources are you dealing with 14 centuries BC? That would be the question. So
yeah.
So you're in a very different. You've got 2,000 years of a gap between those events. But with that said, you can raise the same objection. why haven't we heard more of that? Or something. You can raise the same objection. But go ahead, AB.
Yeah, so I want to give my non-religious approach to that, and just say it's not really, the two things are not equivalent. As David said, I too don't have a problem with the claim that God could split the moon in two, or Allah could split the moon in two. That's a claim of something supernatural happening. I'm not going to try and dispute that. Just the way that I'm not going to try and dispute the idea of the sea being opened and split in two, or of trees and the sun prostrating at night and all that. These are supernatural claims of supernatural things that I'm not here to dispute or say anything about. The idea with the moon splitting in two is that it supposedly happened in the 7th century, that the moon at night was split in two and stood there, and people could clearly observe this. If it's true that this happened, then we would definitely find external sources about that from around the world. We had a lot of mythologies in the 7th century that held the moon in very high regard. People had moon gods. Anything regarding the moon would be extremely important for them. We had advanced people who would observe the moon and the sky day and night. We had people who were standing guard in Western kingdoms and realms. This is not something that would just go unnoticed. People wouldn't be like, who cares? It's just the moon. In comparison to that, what you're talking about in the Bible is something, we don't even know exactly when that would happen, but the estimate is I guess, 1,300, 400, 500 BC. It's a time that is incomparable. And I would say what is exactly happening there is vaguely described and not similar to what the Islamic claim is.
I'll just draw another comparison. Another thing is the intent of sort of bringing forward the miracle. So in Islam, you say, why are you talking about the splitting of the moon? This is supposed to be something that's confirming that Muhammad's a prophet for us, right? Because according to the Quran, it really looks like Muhammad didn't perform any miracles except for bringing the Quran. And then we point out, wait a minute, according to the Quran, Muhammad couldn't perform miracles except bringing the Quran. The response is, but he split the moon. And then the question, what exactly do you mean by he split the moon? Because if a Muslim said, Muhammad performed something, and it appeared to them that way for some supernatural sign to the people who are watching right there, that would be one thing. But Muslims are actually claiming that the moon was split in two, and that it was this miracle. But this is the miracle that's supposed to refute the claim that Muhammad couldn't perform miracles. And so it's actually being put forward as something where we're supposed to test what the evidence is for it. And the evidence is really, really, really shaky, because it's not even clear that the Quran is claiming that Muhammad did anything with the moon. There are even interpretations. You can read one in the commentary of the Yusuf Ali translation of the Quran, where he puts commentary saying one of the interpretations of this is it's talking about a sign of the end times. It's not even talking about something Muhammad did, because it doesn't say Muhammad went out and split the moon. It just says the moon is split in two. It's later Muslim sources from much later that say, Muhammad split the moon. And so you're talking about Muhammad splitting the moon, and it doesn't look like that's what the Quran is saying. And it's much later, and it's written at a time when Muslims are constantly being challenged by Christians and Jews. Hey, if you're saying Muhammad's a prophet, tell us what miracles he did. And all of a sudden they start getting these miracles when their earliest source, the Quran, says he didn't perform any. That looks like something we need to be very, very, very critical about. Whereas, if you're talking about Christianity, the resurrection is the miracle that's put forward as here's something you should be investigating. If you want to know, you should believe in Jesus. And so, sort of different stories entirely.
Yeah. True. I see a lot of questions, but I want to just address one topic because we're getting ready to wrap up to head to the airport, by the way, folks. So I just want to ask both of you about the sheikh and the claim that he was stabbed, basically. I mean, I saw something yesterday. I just want to be careful. Was he stabbed? And do we know anything about this stabbing?
We will be going live to discuss that tomorrow, because as soon as I landed here, I started getting, David, you have not responded. You have not condemned this. I was like, what the heck are you talking about? I know nothing about it. It's always interesting when people condemn you for not condemning something that you had no clue happened, right? It's like, why haven't you condemned this? No idea. I had no idea that it happened. But anyway, we've been here recording nonstop, and so I haven't looked into it. I've seen, I think he was definitely stabbed just based on the comments and so on. But I've also seen things saying that it was a road rage incident. Like he got into an argument with someone while driving or something like that. And then I think I saw, again, this is why I would not want to even talk about it because I haven't looked into it, but supposedly he punched a guy and the guy stabbed him. And then somehow, I guess we're getting, David Wood and the Apostate Prophet are getting blamed for the road rage incident. If it was a road rage incident, that's why we need to look into it. Because it's also possible that, based on what I know, that the guy said, and here's what I'm doing to you in the name of the Apostate Prophet. But I have no idea. And that's why I have not commented on it.
Right?
I have seen that there is a video of the guy actually saying pretty messed up things to him about him being a Muslim. And
okay. Well, that is
and about his videos. So insofar, that's relative.
Okay, so that's not normal. That's not normal.
If that's
road
the
rage,
case, then definitely we certainly I can.
But it could also be true that
annually
David is responsible for the stabbing. That could also be true. But we will discuss that tomorrow. We actually have a live stream set up where we will be reacting to that, David Wood and I, tomorrow. So we can extensively talk about that once we learn more.
So the idea is we will look into it before tomorrow, and then after we've looked into it, then we will comment and we will condemn where condemnation is due. And if someone is stabbing our friend, well, whatever you're stabbing, Uthman ibn Farouk for, then we would condemn you for using violence. But I mean, especially if you're just doing it, not some nut job in a road rage incident, but actually, hey, I'm targeting him because of his videos or something like that. Guess what? None of us want people getting stabbed over videos here.
That is true, and no, I mean it's absolutely wrong. Even if we disagree with his views, that doesn't give anyone the right to go and just stab somebody just because you don't like what.
It's the United States of America, man.
And that's why he's here. And that's why he has the right to express his views and everything. So I have a comment. Thank you, Ragain. You're saying, isn't Islam a polytheistic, basically, as they must pray to the black stone and run between two hells? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything. We did talk about this today also. We did a video, I think, on that. And yes, everything about the rituals of Islam has either a shade of polytheism in it or was adapted from a polytheistic culture. And then it was Islamicized, if you wish. AP, you want to add to this?
Same. I mean, there are many aspects of Islam that are based on pre-Islamic polytheism. I'm actually working on a video where I want to talk about all the pagan aspects of Islam. I'm not sure when I'm going to publish that, probably within the next few days. But there are a lot. I mean, the Kaaba, the Black Stone, the Hajj ritual, just too many things.
Yeah. Well, we have at least a couple of minutes left, folks. Anything else you want to add, David?
I would just agree. Really, really pagan.
Yeah. I mean, anytime, you're touching a stone or kissing a stone or bowing to a stone, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. I mean, it is a stone and you are worshiping a stone. Even if you tell me it represents a deity, that means your worship is going through the stone and somehow making its way to the deity.
And matter of fact, everyone be sure to subscribe to Al-Fadi's channel because we just made videos discussing some of this. And, an example is the story of the satanic verses where the Alat, Alusa, and Manat were these like bird goddesses who would carry your prayers to Allah. And then, of course, every Muslim would recognize that as a bunch of pagan nonsense. But then Muhammad tells his followers that chapters of the Quran are going to appear and intercede for Muslims as flocks of birds. So notice, it is completely a replacement paganism, right? It's, hey, you guys like the ideas of these birdies carrying your prayers to Allah and interceding for you, but yeah, it can't be other goddesses. We'll just make it the Quran. So now chapters of the Quran are taking the function of Alat, Alusa, and Manat. But you ask Muslims, hey, was it paganism when it was Alat, Alusa, and Manat interceding for you as these birds? Yes, that was paganism. Okay, when it's Surat Al-Fatiha and when it's Surat Al-Imran and Surat Al-Baqarah, being these birds who are interceding for you, is that paganism?
Flocks of birds.
Flocks of birds interceding for you. Is that paganism? No, it's pure Islamic monotheism. Just pure Islamic monotheism. You can. In Islam, you could just take anything, any pagan practice in the history of humanity, and just say, we're now saying it's pure monotheism, and it'll suddenly become pure monotheism.
I mean, the black stone will testify on the day of judgment. You greet it when you go to Mecca. You love it, you kiss it, and on the day of judgment, it will rise and will testify and say, hey, this guy, greeted me. So,
well, I hope the darn thing will remember how many times I kissed it.
I hope so too. With that, I also want to say subscribe to the channel, to Al Fadi's channel, to Sierra International.
Appreciate
You might
you
not
guys.
be interested in David Wood's videos, I understand, but I also do some work on this channel, and we have made some videos together, and we'll do more in the future. So
Yep.
subscribe.
I mean, I look forward to having you again, AP. We'll be in touch, and David also, and hopefully we'll do even more videos here, AP. We've been talking about this. So I want to thank everyone here for joining us today in this live stream, and thankful for all of your comments. Sorry if we can get to some of them. And thank you to our moderators for both channels. Thank you, AP. Thank you, David. And again, when are you guys going live tomorrow? Have you decided what time for people?
Yeah, it's already set up on his channel.
Yeah, I didn't ask David. I just set it up. He'll just have to comply with that.
All right. So you guys, it's going to be on your channel, AP?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So tomorrow they'll be live talking about this stabbing that happened, and they should take their time, because you want to investigate something like this and not just rush into making statements that will come back later and be used against you. But again, if indeed the stabbing has to do with difference in views, yeah, that's wrong. Absolutely, that's wrong. I mean, we don't want to condone anybody's being hurt or harmed or stabbed or whatever the case might be. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. This is Al Fadi, over and out. God bless you. Take care.
And stay away from it.